Every single day, we put an incredible amount of trust in the idea that the food we eat is safe. But behind every meal, behind every single bite, there's this complex, kind of invisible system that's designed to protect us. Today, we're going to pull back that curtain and take a look. So what exactly are these systems? Well, it's not just a single checklist or one big rule. It's actually a series of interlocking layers that all work together. In this explainer, we're going to break down the 3 fundamental layers that really form the bedrock of modern food safety.
All right, let's start at the very beginning, with the absolute foundation for any place that makes food. This is what we call good manufacturing practices, or GMPs for short. Honestly, you can just think of it as Food Safety 101. Now, the official definition calls GMPs the minimum requirements. And I really want you to focus on that word minimum, because that's key. These aren't just good ideas or helpful suggestions. They are the fundamental, non-negotiable rules of the road for producing safe food.
To make sense of it all, we can organize these rules into 4 main pillars. First, there's personnel. That's the people doing the work. Then you have the building and facilities themselves. Next up, the equipment and utensils they're using. And finally, production and process controls, which is all about managing the workflow. Pretty much every basic safety rule you can think of will fit into one of these buckets.
So let's take a look at a really simple, practical example from that first pillar, personnel. We're talking about proper hand washing. It might seem basic, but it is one of the most critical GMPs there is. It's such a simple action, but it prevents the transfer of so many potential contaminants.
All right, pop quiz time. Take a good, close look at this picture. If you were a food safety inspector walking through this facility, what's the one thing that would immediately jump out at you as a GMP violation?
If you spotted the watches, you are absolutely right. GMPs for personnel are very strict about jewelry. A watch, a ring, even an earring, any of it could fall into the product and become what we call a physical hazard. This is just a classic textbook example of a GMP violation. Okay, so the GMPs give us the general rules, right? Things like no jewelry. But that brings up a question. How do you make sure everyone follows that rule the exact same way, day in and day out? Well, that brings us to our next layer, standard operating procedures. The best way to think about an SOP is as a super detailed instruction manual. So if the GMP is the rule, like wash your hands, the SOP is the document that tells you exactly who has to wash, when they have to wash, how they have to do it, and even what to do if, say, the soap runs out. It turns those general rules into very specific, repeatable actions. Now, a food facility will have SOPs for pretty much everything you can imagine, but some of the most critical, the most foundational procedures are the ones that deal with sanitation. Keeping the plant and the equipment clean is really the cornerstone of preventing contamination.
In fact, they're so important they get their very own acronym, SSOPs. That just stands for Sanitation Standard Operating Procedures. This is the detailed playbook for everything related to cleaning and sanitizing, from the floors and drains all the way up to the most complicated piece of machinery. And this brings us to a really crucial distinction that we have to make. In our everyday lives, we tend to use the words cleaning and sanitizing like they mean the same thing. But in the world of food safety, they mean 2 very, very different things. So here's the difference, and it's actually pretty simple. Cleaning is the physical process. It's scrubbing and wiping to remove all the visible gunk, the dirt and food residue. And that removes most of the bacteria, sure. But then, sanitizing is the chemical process that kills or reduces the invisible microbes that are left behind. And here's the most important takeaway. You absolutely must clean before you can effectively sanitize. You can't sanitize a dirty surface. So really, it's never an either-or situation. A successful food safety program needs both of these steps, done correctly and in the right order every single time, just like it says in those SSOPs we were just talking about. All right, so let's do a quick recap. We've got our foundation with GMPs, and we have our detailed rulebook with SOPs. Now we're ready for the most advanced layer, a proactive, science-based system known as HACCP. The origin story for HACCP is actually fascinating. It comes straight out of the space program. I'm not kidding. Back in the 1960s, Pillsbury developed it for NASA because they had this huge problem. How can you be almost 100% sure that astronaut food is safe? You can't just test every brownie that's going into orbit. The answer was to build a system that made the food safe by design. It was, quite literally, rocket science for food safety.
And that gets us right to the core philosophy of HACCP. This system was a huge shift in thinking. For a long time, food safety was about inspecting the final product and hoping you would catch any problems. HACCP flips that on its head. It's all about preventing hazards from ever happening in the first place. It is proactive, not reactive.
So, how does it do that? How does it actually prevent problems? Well, this approach is built on a logical, scientific sequence of 7 core principles. Just think of this as the scientific method, but applied to food production. First, you figure out all the potential hazards. Then, you find the exact points in the process where you can control for those hazards. We call those critical control points, or CCPs. For each one, you set a scientific limit, like a minimum cooking temperature. Then you monitor those points, you have a plan for what to do if a limit isn't met, and you keep detailed records to prove the whole system is working.
So now we've covered GMPs, SOPs, and HACCP. And it's so important to understand that these aren't just 3 separate options you can pick from. They are all integrated parts of one single comprehensive system.
They really work like a pyramid. Each level builds on the one below it. You can't possibly implement a successful HACCP plan in a building that doesn't already have solid, good manufacturing practices in place. It just wouldn't work. This diagram of a shield shows the whole thing perfectly. Basic sanitation is your absolute foundation. On top of that, you build your GMPs and your specific SSOPs. And only when you have that strong base can you finally implement the advanced preventative framework of HACCP. When they're all working together, they create this powerful, layered defense for our food. We've covered a lot of ground here, from something as basic as hand washing to a system that was literally designed for space travel. It's a real testament to decades of science that have gone into making our food supply one of the safest in the world. So the next time you sit down for a meal, maybe you'll have a new appreciation for that invisible, systematic shield that's protecting every single bite.